denomination and the light we seek. And our reading this morning is from the words of Chief Dan George, or Geswanuth Slahut, who was chief of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation in Vancouver. By the way, he received an Academy Award nomination for his role in Little Big Man, and he's the author of a couple of books, My Heart Soars and My Spirit Soars. May the stars carry your sadness away, may the flowers fill your heart with beauty, and may hope forever wipe away your tears. So it's my high privilege this morning to introduce Judith Lowry, who would introduce herself as a storyteller who paints rather than the artist we've built her as. So you can judge for yourself, but she may get more credit than she gives herself credit for. Her father was one of the most highly decorated U.S. soldiers in World War II. He was of Mountain Maidu and Achomawi ancestry. That's the Pit River tribes of northeastern California. A few Washoe ancestors sprinkled in too, I think. Now, I once had a Maidu patient from Greenville who told me that through much of the 19th century, the Maidu and the Washoe were at war over the abduction of a Washoe woman, but apparently they eventually realized who their real enemy was, namely us. So, Judith's father met her Australian mother when stationed in Sydney in World War II, and she will describe for you the disparate influences of his various duty stations around the world. She won her first art competition at the age of 6, drawing some apparently vibrant, strange creatures. I don't think she stopped. She received a BA in Fine Art at Humboldt State and an MFA in Painting and Drawing at Chico State. She cites Giotto and Botticelli as her influences, but also the Native American artists Frank Day and Harry Fonseca. Her art's been exhibited at the Crocker Art Museum, the Wheelwright Museum, the Carl Gorman Museum, the Heard Museum, and her work is included in the permanent collection at the Smithsonian. Many of you have seen her recent exhibit at the Nevada Museum of Art, which provoked so much excitement, and some of that excitement is right here in the room.
That's right.
So with that, I present Judith Lowry.
Oh, nice. That was a nice introduction. Thank you. So, yes, my parents met in Sydney at a USO facility, you know what that is, where they entertain the soldiers, on Cremorne Point, Sydney Bay. And he had taken a live prisoner, and that's how he earned that 2 weeks off. If you were able to take a live prisoner, you could get information from them. So the idea, you would try to capture them alive, right? So he met her, and he had never seen anything quite like her. She lived in Australia, which had, at that time, a form of apartheid. There were very few people of color entered that nation, and except for the Aborigines who were there, but they were pushed back into the outback and onto reserves. So I think it was a very striking moment for them. They wrote letters to each other for 4 years after he returned to the States, and she aboarded this ship called the Marine Phoenix, and you saw the painting named Marine Phoenix in the museum. And then they moved out to Washington, D.C. in 1948. I was born. So I was born in our nation's capital, but Susanville, California has always been home base for me. As a kid growing up in different countries and all over this country, you know, we had to have an anchor, right? We had to have a place. And so coming home before we were deployed or stationed somewhere, and then on our return to the States, we would always make our way. Dad would always make his way to his hometown. And some call it a miserable little mountain town, but that's just one way of describing this glorious place. And with the mountains sweeping up on both sides of you and the sun coming up, we have this thing we call the Susanville solstice. Happens twice a year where the sun comes up right at the end of Main Street out towards you. And so we all gather at the top of town to watch it, and that's our special thing. So there's something about the remoteness and the quietness that I like, the quietude. And we certainly have our problems and our issues. And since we're speaking about resilience here today, this is a little town that pretty much personifies that. After especially the Dixie Fire came roaring through, I could not get up there at the time. I was living in Nevada City, but my cousins were sending images of the mountains just ablaze and cinders falling on their homes and the smoke everywhere. But I knew to stay put because the last thing those firemen and women need you to do is to get in their way. So all I could do is get up there soon. And if you drive that burn, there again, to me, it was shocking at some point to go through the Feather River and see burned areas and then clear areas. My cousins up there in Greenville said it had claws, this fire would claw and leave some green and scorch the rest. And some of them stayed and fought that fire. But as you come around where normally you see just this big hill with trees, all of a sudden it looks like something like a black Japanese screen, like a bamboo screen. That's all the trees that have been burned. And you see the lake through that. And it's like a whole different way of perceiving the landscape. And I finally got to Susanville. I drove up to the top of town where my dad's grave lies, alongside Thomas Tucker, who was a Maidu boy killed in World War I. So the two only veterans in that old pioneer cemetery. And I sat on a bench next to his grave, and I looked at that mountain, scorched as it was, and I thought, you just got a haircut. This has been happening for millennia, and you're still there. And that is a form of resilience that is as solid as the Sierra itself, as all this granite. And I think when you take that into yourself, and feel that power of the land. That's why, I think why I moved up there. And I love the foothills, but it's a lot of fun and a lot of distraction and a whole lot of trees that people live in, and it just really worries me. So maybe, how did the poem, far from the madding crowd's ignoble strife, their sober wishes never learn to stray. Along that cool, sequestered veil of life, they keep the noiseless tenor of their way. So, although I gotta come to Reno once in a while for some fun. I gotta be in Reno, because it's just a great, what's happening here again, the resilience of this little gambling town, and had some starting in the 60s and 70s, it started to just go downhill. And what's happening in the midtown. And again, art, again, is the heart of resilience. Creativity beyond what we have. And I'm just really thrilled to be here and to have been at that incredible museum that is lifting this whole region. And as a great person from the Great Basin tribes, and that's what we consider ourselves. And if you've ever looked on a map at the shape of the Great Basin, it's kind of strange looking. But that's what it is. And now we have something that all the other big culturals, I've seen it happen. I saw Santa Fe burst open in the 80s and 90s. I saw Soho in New York burst open in the late 70s, early 80s. And I think our time has come here. And that museum as an institution, and now it's joining up with the college. David Walker and President Sandoval sat down and wrote a compact between the college and the university, and they're restoring a campus out on Lake Tahoe. So this is a great conjunction, if you ask me. So, but let's get to the work. Do you want to see some work? Yeah. Interested, okay. What are we looking at? Okay.
There we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so we're gonna start there. This is King Ludwig's castle, and it's not Neuschwanstein, it's Linderhof Castle. And I was 6, so I was completely inspired by the Rococo, the heavy duty, gopher baroque, they say, it's just everything was so ornate. And I think in this room, one of the bedrooms, I was astonished to see how this wealthy king had his dinner table brought up through pulleys from the kitchen to his, and then I don't know how they did it, but so he could have dinner in this sumptuous room above the kitchen. Wouldn't have to walk up and down stairs. And so right away I was exposed to things that, when I came back to California, things looked pretty dull, You go to enough palaces. I remember going into the Louvre, and I think I was particularly taken by Rubens, his huge figures and so beautifully painted. And yet, he was considered, kind of a stooge for the royalty to paint for them. And but still, this incredible craft, and their techniques were so beautiful. So, next slide. And again, more of his palace. We can keep going through this because this is my first children's book. It's called The Adventures of Blinky Bill, and he is sort of like the Australian Mickey Mouse, but not so funny. It's the story starts out, if you go to the next page, if I believe where we are here, that's him. He gets into mischief. What's he doing? Oh, he's breaking eggs in a bowl because he doesn't know what they are, and he thinks they're silly because they're all gooey. The next slide. So you see he's a little mischief. Now, this is where it gets sad. In the very first chapter of this children's book, 1953, I received my copy. His father is shot to death in a tree by a hunter. Now, why anybody would be hunting koala bears, I don't know, but hunters will, some of them will shoot at anything, and so it starts with this very tragic, and you go through it in real time with Daddy in the tree, and then he feels a terrible sharp pain. So I'm 6. I was a precocious reader, and it just broke my heart, And next picture. That's him. They even have an illustration of Dad in the tree with tears coming down his face because somebody's shooting him. The next book I got was a story called Dot and the Kangaroo, about a little girl that wanders too far from her home into the bush, which is what they call the forest, and gets lost and is now running, is hungry, her little legs are scratched, her dress is torn, and she's completely lost deep in the bush. And she thinks all is lost until a kindly kangaroo meets up with her, this mother kangaroo, who feeds her these berries. And once she eats the berries, they can communicate in English. And you can keep going through Dot and the Kangaroo. It's another children's story, mind you, right? And then we have Snugglepot and Cuddlepie. This is another very, very famous Australian book. Just as, we have our famous ones, and so do they. And so they're gumnut babies. They live in the eucalyptus trees, and they have the little cap of the eucalyptus nut as their little hats. And keep going. Next slide, please. And that's May Gibbs. She's the very famous Australian illustrator, and she made these stories. And you can see the little gumnut babies hiding. And also there's a chapter in the book about the finding of little Obaliah. She's a little mermaid queen. So it's a very fanciful, and all these little creatures somehow reflect the botanicals of Australia. They have I think I might have the next slide. That's a visit to the dentist. If you can see it, it's So all the forest creatures have some job, and I guess it's this large ant-like creature because he's got pincers in there. Yeah. She's a really, and you can see how a child's imagination can just, this is off the hook. Next, please. Oh, and then, all seems well until this is the villain of these books. It's called The Big Bad Banksia Man. And you see he's running off with a little gumnut baby who he'll probably devour. Remember, this is a children's book, right? This is for kids. Okay. So, and then this book. Okay, so now we're in Germany. Dad, we're not in Australia. We were down there because my dad had to go on a hardship tour to Korea after the Korean War. So now we're all together. We're in Germany and living in Munich. And this book. It's the Straubpeter, and that means slovenly Peter. And this book is full of, this boy refuses to cut his hair, groom his hair, or his fingernails, so he ends up looking monstrous. Next slide. This little girl, she wouldn't stop crying all the time, so her eyes fall out. Next slide.
Mom would say what happened.
Oh, this little boy wouldn't stop sucking his thumbs, and they said there's a man in the closet with shears, and he'll come out and chop those thumbs off, and the little boy didn't believe him. So, yeah, he kept sucking his thumbs, so now no thumbs anymore, so problem solved, right? Germans are, well, anyway, I found out only 2 years ago that we have German ancestry. I thought we had French ancestry, not a bit. And here I was, eating French bread, lots of butter and cheese, and plenty of red wine because, I'm protected with my French ancestry. Find out, I should have been eating what? Rhine wine or strudel or something. But that's a little girl that played with matches. There's 2 versions of that. This has been illustrated and republished over the decades. Wouldn't stop playing with matches, and so she a pile of ashes. And the next one, next slide, please. Okay, so now we get into my work. So you can see that it isn't an entire leap for me to think of things in visual terms that are unusual that you wouldn't see in real life. And in this story, most cultures have a period in their time that they refer to as a sort of upside down time, inside out world, something strange. The Hupa and Yurok Indians up north, they believe that if there's a certain place in the forest at certain times, you don't go in there because you'll see fish in the trees and birds crawling on the ground, all these weird things. And in this time, before humans came on the earth, and the animals could converse with each other, they existed with these horrible flesh-eating deer, and could walk on hind legs. And there's this white wolf. He features as the hero in many of the stories my dad told her. It was a mixture of Maidu and Pit River, which are very similar stories anyway. And he takes care of this little weasel. He's sort of his guardian. And one day he gives the little weasel, who's done such nice work around their little camp, their little kamputi, he said, well, I'll give you a toy. He gives him a little round skull of a little unborn fawn and a stick. And kids used to roll hoops and balls, but that's the kind of game he was playing. And he said, but you have to get your chores done before you play. Well, the little weasel, I'll do all that. So the little weasel, he starts playing with his toy, and then he puts it away like he's told. He puts it under a little place. And at one point, he realizes that it's kind of hard to get that little toy pushed away where it's supposed to go. But he drags it out, and he plays with it anyway when it's his time to play. And then one day he notices it's kind of wobbling, and it's developing bumps on it, and he ignores that. And this is where he goes wrong. He doesn't tell Pop. He doesn't tell the wolf. Because why? He doesn't want to lose his toy. And this is a child's reaction. But what happens is eventually, here we have this poor little weasel dragging this heavy thing up the hill to roll it down, because he can't get it to roll any other way. And what appear to be the beginning of antlers, and he gets it up to the top of the hill, hits it with his little stick, and in a flash of light it becomes this huge flesh-eating deer, which grabs him, throws it over its shoulder, and runs away to this cave, where you can see the other animals. They're all in there, you know, being fattened up, like the witch in Hansel and Gretel, right? Getting fattened up to be a meal. And the wolf realizes, you know, he comes home and realizes the little guy is gone, but he's a superior tracker, right? So he figures out what's happened. He sees the tracks, and now he knows dark magic has occurred, so gotta go get the little guy. So he finds the cave, and there they are in there, and he disguises himself. He makes a quick leafy, like a shawl. And I have to tell you this, because we're all adults. The way my dad always told me is he curled his tail up and wrapped it up like it was a baby. And pretended, and then he was looking completely innocuous, like an old woman with a baby begging for shelter, so the deer let him in. In the real story, my dad didn't tell me this, he actually cuts off his member. And yeah, and what is that? Well, it could grow back though. This is magic, right? But the thing, the idea is that, I said, Dad, why didn't you ever tell us? He says, well, you're little American kids. Indian children didn't have those kind of self-consciousness about the body. That was, to them, it wouldn't have been any big deal. So that tells me something about the culture, how it shifted. But anyway, getting back, so he finds his little brother and he says, I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to get you, you little weasel. I'm going to get you out of here. You better not get in trouble. And just be quiet. But the little weasel is so excited, he starts telling all the other, my brother is here. He's here. Yeah. He's here. He's going to save me. My guy, he's here. He's going to save me. And it alerts the deer, who turn around. And at this point, this is the point, the climax of the story, basically. The wolf throws off his disguise. And the deer, they're smart enough to not mess with this guy. He's got a reputation. His magic of his own. He's fierce. He's loyal. He's the leader. And they dissipate and they run away because they're afraid. And he's able to free his little weasel friend and all of the little animals. So the moral of the story is, tell your folks. Anything makes you uncomfortable as a child. And we've only learned this in the past few decades, to get our children to open up about anything that bothers them and concerns them. Trust your guardian, and to the guardians, be trustworthy. You know, that's solid cultural magic right there. So, next slide, please. This, what was the name of that fire that was at Lake Tahoe?
Caldor.
Pardon?
Caldor fire.
There was another one.
Yeah.
I had some cousins from Australia come and visit, and they wanted to see Lake Tahoe. And it had happened that year where we were driving by homes with the cars were burned and the homes were burned. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the fire, but this painting came out of that because, again, in that sort of upside down world, the Maidu and Pit Rivers believed that if you go, they would tell their children, and this was a device in order to gain purchase over the discipline of their children. There were no fences or walls to protect the kids against wildlife. So if you go too far into the forest, these fire creatures, they're only about this tall. They're like small men, impish kind of, and they are made of fire, and if they catch you, they will throw their hair and they'll flick you with their fire and immolate you on the spot. So you want to stay out of there. And that's when I saw the power and the magnitude of that fire, I had to create some demons. I mean, it just came into my mind. So that's how, and again, you know, California and Nevada are good at rebuilding after these kind of fires. And part of that resilience is also our care of the forest, that we now know that prescribed burning is a good thing, and that the growing a population too close to the interface is probably not a good idea. So that's where we leave it to our creatives and our architects to come up with better ways to house all of this, and that's what we need. And we're going to continue to have these fires. So, as far as I can see. Next slide, please. More fire. This is, again, our children are being, well, all of us now, but our children are being subjected to more and more bullying. How do we make them resilient against that? You know, they're young, they're tender, and we're not with them when they're going to school. And in this story, this rat, and back in his time, had a large, like a squirrel, beautiful fluffy tail. Gorgeous, magnificent, you know, he'd like to show it off. But he would get up on this rock that you see behind him. And this was his occupation. He would lure smaller animals, weaker animals, and bait them, taunt them until they would fight him, wrestle with him. And because he was a superior wrestler, he would always win and throw them behind the rock. Behind the rock, his 3 wives, who were blind owls, would rush out when they heard something hit the fire, and they'd come out and they'd start heaping on the embers and cooking whoever it was for their dinner. And here's that little weasel again. You see him up in the corner with his little buddy, the little raccoon, and his name is Weibo-Sim, by the way. And so Weibo-Sim sees this going on, and he's always getting into trouble. You know, he's that character in these mythologies, and like a teenage boy, he just can't stay out of trouble. So he decides to challenge the rat for himself. He goes, his name is Shaboom, and little Weibo says, "Hey Shaboom, I could wrestle you." And Shaboom looks over, but Shaboom, like the deer, knows who his guardian is. He says, "Nah, kid, you know, you just move along. I don't." And but Weibo-Sim is not to be dissuaded. He's, "Oh, well, no, I'm pretty sure I can take you, you know." And then it turns into, "So you're probably chicken, right?" And you know, bullies don't like that. They can be easily baited with their egos, right? So finally, after much taunting and so forth, the rat says, "Okay, get up here, I'll wrestle you." And pretty sure you can beat him anyway. But the weasel is even slipperier and even a better wrestler. He has his small size, but he uses it against the rat's larger size because he knows how. And he ends up throwing the rat into his own fire. And the wives come out. They don't know what's in the fire because this is blind obedience. And they start cooking him. He survives, but only with his hair on his tail completely singed off, which is why now Indian grandmothers would tell their grandchildren, this is why the rat runs and hides from you, because he's so ashamed of his ugly naked tail. That's what he gets for being a bully. So that, to all children, I wish resilience. I wish we can come up with a formula for them to not hear, to not pay attention to people that want to denigrate you or pick on you, because that's their fears. And if we could get that across to them, that would give them more resilience, I think. Next picture. Next slide, please. This is my dad, Leonard, as he appeared, as he would have gotten off the bus in Susanville in 1944, after 2 terrible years of fighting in the Philippines. And he went in a private, came out a captain. And that little scar on his cheek, you can't see it, but that was shrapnel. Took out his 2 front teeth. That was one of the 22 entry and exit wounds he had in his body when we buried him.
Wow.
Yeah, 4 clusters on his Purple Heart. You don't get 5 Purple Hearts. You get 1 Purple Heart and a cluster for each successive wounding. So 4 clusters on his Purple Heart. And the Distinguished Service Cross. That came in Korea. But here's how he would have looked getting off the bus. And he walks up the street to the State Saloon and goes in and orders a cold beer because it's a warm day. And before he takes his hike up to his parents' house. And Betty Ducassie, who we all knew, long gone now, but she said, "I'm sorry, Leonard, you know I can't serve you a beer. You're an Indian." Because at that point in time, it was illegal for them to purchase alcohol. And, you know, for years, I was so resentful of Mrs. Ducassie, because I knew her in other ways, too. And her husband was one of the sheriff's posse, and they were an old-time couple. But one day I was griping. I was young, Indian activist, you know, and I was like, rah, rah, in my 20s, and I was like, hi. And my dad said, are you still upset about that? And I said, yeah, this is him. He said, oh no. He said, I thanked her. He said that she's a good woman. She was only doing what she thought was right. And I knew that. Because he grew up knowing, he was a boarding school kid and everything. He said, I walked down the street about a block and a half to Marion, a little Italian bar. So I opened the door and he goes, 20 faces turned around and went, Leonard Lowry, home from the war, get in here, your money's no good here. And he spent much of the afternoon with his buddies telling his war stories, and they wanted to know everything. And he said, you know, it's not the color of people's skin, it's what's in here. You know, so he never had this resentment against so-called white people because he was half European himself. Plenty of Irish. I think that's why he was actually so handsome and tall. I mean, that was a nice intersection of cultures. Although, and even for myself, hybrid people who come from cultures that are that far apart, separated by, they're not, you know, there are certain things that we end up with physically, like irregularities in our feet a little bit, or something with our ears, I've heard. So there's just something where maybe the genes are getting together. Hey, what's all this? You know, that moment, you know, when you're conceived. But he was a very good-looking man, and of course you can see why my mom was struck. And can we have the next picture? Mm-hmm. This is his grandmother. Her name was Willis Cold. She was part Modoc and Pitt River. She was Hamawi back Pitt River, and we know Modoc, which is further up in the latitudes. When she was a little girl, she had a near-death experience, and they put her on her funeral scaffold. They could detect no signs of life, and but a few days later, she woke up and came out of the coma and crying for her mother, and you can imagine how happy they were. But they also sent her into the healing arts because they believed she needed that training because she'd been to the other side. That's what they believed. And so this is her late in her life. I think she passed it in 1938, and she was a doctor to her people in the way that she had a very extensive pharmacopoeia of herbs and methods that had been passed down for generations that was more like holistic healing. And when she would see Dr. Davis, the old American doctor that they had in town, she would say, that man with the bag that comes to my daughter's house and takes care of my grandchildren, what is he? What do you call him? And they said, he's a doctor, and she said, that's what I am. And so a lot of, you'll hear Indian people refer to doctoring. And she wanted that appellation because she felt that she deserved it as much as his kind of medicine. So, next slide, please. And that's the painting that I did. And it refers to actually what happened to her. She had a healing that kind of went bad and it made her sick. But down on, you see the little flower in the can. That was something, she would go out to Pyramid Lake and see this doctor woman named Sudi. And Sudi would, one of her methods was to pick a certain plant, put it in a can, and you would stay with her for a few days, and she would observe the plant, and she would observe you, and then tell you about how your health was. And so that was her doctor, who also did what they call standing feathers. And so they could make them stand. I don't know, I haven't seen it, but that was one of the stories. And in her basket is a two-headed snake, because she was a mouth healer, which meant that she would use a straw or place her mouth directly on the patient where the pain was. And usually that patient would be on the floor. There would be a row of women singers that would sing. And then two strong guys, because when the illness would enter her body, this is because she was an intermediate, that's what empaths do, it would throw her back. And she couldn't hit the ground. And what happened was they did catch her, and she fell and hit her head, so she was unconscious for a couple of days. And when she woke up, she said, I dreamed I swallowed a two-headed snake, which meant it's time, I'm done. And it was shortly after that she passed. So I don't know. I've never seen this kind of medicine, actually. There's no practitioners anymore, but I do believe it involved a good pharmacopoeia and a good deal of psychology. And I mean, you could do a lot with the human brain, right? And especially when there's nothing else. They didn't have the kind of pharmaceuticals, which can be iffy even so. You know, we've got good drug, we don't know. So anyway, next slide. And this, you can imagine her as a younger woman. This was her baby daddy. So this is Alan Brasher Evans from the wealthy Evans family that lived here in Reno. So Willis Cole Calder, as they named her, Susie Jack, she had, as a little girl, had to flee the Battle of the Infernal Caverns. It was kind of like ICE. They went in and just vigilantes taking out Indian settlements so they could have the land for grazing. And again, when she was 19, I think there was another expulsion she was involved in. So she ends up in Reno as a domestic housekeeper. And so she's gone from one kind of culture into a completely different kind of culture. And Alan's mother, he was only one of many handsome sons. They had been in the Civil War, some officers. They were all accomplished. Evans Street over there in the university, that was part of their property. I have no idea what's happened to the descendants. I can read about the old ones, but I don't know where any of those people are. But they had sons and daughters. But she would hire women of color to work in her house because Reno wasn't the city of light that it is today, high society. It was pretty rough, and she was worried that some strumpet, as she put it, would get in there and mess with the family fortune, get pregnant, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas with women of color, no footprints, right? Not much they could do. So that this happened that Alan fell in love with my great grandmother. She was beautiful when she was young and intelligent, and he moved her out to Constancia, and they had a couple of children before his drinking and his womanizing kind of got to her, and she had to leave him. But that's my relative, and I sure would like to know more about what happened to the rest of them. Next picture, please. Oh, that's them. So that's Susie and Alan and her sister. And Susie's on this end. And this is when she's much younger, and that's out at their ranch in Constancia. He was in drayage, and I think he grew stuff. And I mean, all of Long Valley, Evans Valley, that was theirs. Next. Now this is my grandmother, my father's mother. And her name is Edna. And she is Susie's daughter by Alan Brasher. And she was offered a chance to live with that family if she forsook her mother and her native ways, and she refused. So she fully committed to life with her mother and moved to Susanville. And I think they worked out at Amity and Honey Lake, where they used to have the hot springs out there. And there was a hotel back there. A train would bring people in to take the waters and relax. And so they worked as housemates there. Next picture, please. And that is my portrait of Edna and her two oldest children, Leo and Viola, at Honey Lake, where they lived. And the swans represent the children that she lost. She had 12 children and saw 5 to adulthood. Leo, in her arms, was her only, what we call all one color little Indian guy. He was a hybrid, you know, she was mixed, and so was her husband. They were both what they used to call half-breeds. And I like the Harry Potter half-bloods. Half-bloods, they were half-bloods. And he was killed at a gunfire accident. Every little boy hunted back then, 8, 9, 10 years old. They would be hunting for the family back then. And this is 1918, and there was a discharge. She heard it out on the porch and came out. And poor Leo had his, was shot in the head. And so this is my memorial to her and her children. And you can see that she knew how to dress. That's an actual outfit she wore. And she walked both worlds pretty well, I thought. And then that takes true resilience right there. That she survived all of that and was still a loving, caring woman. And not an ounce of racism. She had many white lady friends as she did Indian friends. She got along with everybody. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is John Lowery, little Irish guy, had red hair when he was young, rode with Kit Carson out in Santa Fe, made his way out to Northern California. He worked the Applegate Trail and the Noble Trails as a scout. And he met Julia. Can we go to the next picture? I think that's her. Yeah, he met this woman when she was 15 at what they call a big time. And the big times were kind of like State Fair. You've seen the old movie State Fair. I mean, it was a big deal. They'd travel in, and it was the same thing with these big times. Indian families would travel in, and they would share, you know, what kind of acorns they were harvesting, and obsidian. Some of those Pit River boys, my dad said, would bring down hunks of obsidian almost as big as an automobile, as a feat of strength. And then they would chip it up and sell parts of it at the big time, over the length of time. And there was all kinds of, activities. And she was 15, very tall, which was unusual. And she won a foot race. And that's back when girls had to run to make them fit for childbirth, as opposed to back then, Pioneer women were told to don't move, don't do anything, because you might shake your baby loose or something. I don't know what they thought. But in their culture, these girls had to run the equivalent of 10 miles without too much stress. And so they were all strong and fit, and they also had a much better diet than what they became exposed to. But he courted her, and then he went to her father. He wanted to marry her. He paid $15 a pair of brand new boots, and I forget what else, but that was his payment, which was not cheap stuff in those days. She was quality, girl. It was a good, offer to her dad, and her dad agreed to let him. And so they moved up to Oregon. He went on the trail. He left her with the toddler, and she's expecting again. And they were up near Pendleton, I think. And he left her there to go do a job for a few months, and she got very uncomfortable with some of the Chinese workers. These men also were prohibited to have anything to do with white women. They'd be deadly. But Indian girls, kind of fair game. Chinese girls, Mexican girls, fair game. Even Hawaiians, the Kanakas that came over from, and she just got uncomfortable, and so she hooked up with a wagon train and walked all the way to Greenville with a toddler, and most people walked. We drive around in cars with shocks and springs, but you would not want to actually ride in a buckboard. They're just really, so most people walk beside their, unless they were really needed to be off their feet. It was not a pleasant ride. But that's how she got home. And when he got back to Oregon looking for her, they said she went home to her mama, and he went back to Greenville. They built the ranch. They ended up having 10 children. They adopted 3, and a long, happy life together in Greenville. And the ranch is still in our family, part of our family owns it, and it survived the Dixie Fire in Greenville. So we're really proud of her. So she was quite a strong woman, Julia. And we believe now that she had significant Washoe because she used that as a last name. Her mother had been a slave. She was a Pit River girl sent to live with the Maidus because some boys had gotten into a rumble up there, and they figured, and there had been some killing. And so to replace those lives, the chiefs, the heads got together and decided that they would give these girls up. So we think she came out of the second group of children that old Lucy had. And I've just come across this information. I'm just finding out so much more about that now through a distant relative, that she may have been more Washoe than Maidu. And because eventually her mother was sold to this guy, and he was a Washoe man. So there's still so much more to find out about these incredible people. And the fact that I am 1% Asian in my genetics and 1% Inca tells me that the Inca line came, that's Susie, and that look at her, I mean, though she was northern, I think she came down from the plateau, some of her heritage, looks very plains, the way she wore her hair, and just her features, you can see the Asian influence in there. And so I think we've kind of figured out where the roots, the deep roots of our history come from, and the incredible journey of those resilient women. Walk the trail all the way up through South America, Mexico, Mesoamerica, all the way up to Northern California. Those women on their feet. So, next picture, please. And that's my portrait of them at their ranch together, taken from an old photograph. Next picture, please. Oh, that's one of their daughters. That's Annie Gorbett. She ended up marrying Archie Gorbett, and they were the ones that ran the Lowery Ranch. And those are her beautiful baskets. And it's the only picture I've seen with her hair down. She usually wore it up or plaited in some way, but she was showing off her baskets. And I have one of those. I have a little basket that she did. Next photograph, please. This is my brother. We're on a ship headed to Australia. That was my dad's first hardship tour. That's when I went to Australia, and I was about 5, 6. And he did not live a long life. He was not happy being a man of color. I think I didn't, because we had the same mom and dad, but this is the genetic shake, right? I turned out to be fair skinned, and I couldn't pass for an Indian, really. My dad and my brother could not pass for white. There's just no way. And he felt every bit of the bullying, and we lived in the Deep South. We lived in military communities. The world was not kind to him. And he was not resilient. He was an escapist. He was so handsome, but at the end of the day, he was 47 when he died. He drove into a river in a truck. Yeah, he'd fallen into drugs too as well, and he gave up. And I was the sickly child, in and out of hospitals. I had an undiagnosed allergy to cigarette smoke that caused me many health problems over the years. My mom and dad didn't know, and nobody on every plane where every restaurant. You'd be in the movie theater, it was everywhere, right? And it affected me to this day. I have some autoimmune issues. But, you just keep rolling, right? You just do what you can. But he couldn't, and I miss what could have been. He could have been something. He could have been a spokesman for our people, like Dennis Banks, or, Vine Deloria Jr., something like that. So there have been casualties along the way, and he's not the only one in my family. Next picture.
So Judith, we have 15 minutes.
Okay. Okay. I can stop anywhere too. But this is, again, a portrait of my family, and we're all on separate canvases for a reason. And my parents had, and I actually have a home movie buried somewhere of this moment where my father's filming my brother dancing around in a little Indian. Here we are in Munich, Germany, and we're celebrating my brother's culture, although it's Plains Indians. My warriors don't look like that at all. But I remember thinking, well, where's my Indian costume? And they handed me a drum and said, play this so your brother can dance. So I'm standing there playing this little drum. And that was when I realized, at the age of about 6.5, that my family was different, that we were a mixed race family. And when I sort of started paying attention, to how people regarded us and so forth. So it's interesting. Next picture. That's my mom. That's what Dad saw when he met her. And that was her picture just before she came over to marry him. She had a nice portrait done. Back in those days, everybody was having portraits done in portrait parlors, but now everybody's got a camera on their phone, so you don't see so much of that. She's 21 years old, a lot of lot of bravery to get on a boat with 2 suitcases and go marry an American Red Indian. I mean, my grandparents in Australia thought she was going to be living in a teepee, you know. Next picture, please. Stark difference. These are my Australian grandparents getting married. That's my grandmother, and that's my grandfather seated next to her, and my 2 great-grandmothers on either side. So when my parents got married, there was a huge, my Indian grandparents never were married, but there was no way they could be. It wasn't really legal. And my parents, even when my parents got married in 1947, there were anti-miscegenation laws on the books. So they got married in Reno and got the hairy eyeball when my dad put down his Scot-Irish on the paper. When they got out to Washington, D.C., he arranged to be married, just the 2 of them and a couple with them at the National Cathedral. And they got a priest to come in and they got married all over again. So, because it just didn't feel right in Reno at that point in time. Next picture. Okay, so I'll just do a couple. Social commentary will go pretty fast. This is a Indian guy. He's posed like Ishi on the cover of Kroeber's book, but he's on his way to the powwow and he's dismembering a roadkill, which is so sad. I don't know. It just seems sad when I see that. Next picture. Wedding in Reno. My cousin Butch Crew marrying Jean Lamar's sister. Jean, the famous Jean Lamar. That didn't last long, and I used to show that next to the picture of my grandparents to show the difference in those. But I love that. It's a little anachronistic, but next. Oh, and that's Jean in the purple dress, looking very suspiciously at my cousin, like, you better treat my sister right. Can I have the next picture, please? This is about alcohol and Indians. This is my dad from a small scrap of a photograph. I imagined their bodies in the bar myself, but they're being set afire by the hidden dangers of alcohol, and I'm using European putti from different Renaissance paintings to light them up, because they were celebrating 1945. Most Indian men now have been soldiers in a war. They're not just, their status has changed, they get to drink. Not a good idea. And but I forget where that was, but I know that when he got home to Susanville, he was denied a drink. So wherever this was, and it was, I don't know, but yeah, that's where it started, I think right after the war and during the war, because liquor was something they would send to the soldiers. Yeah, beer and hard alcohol for the officers, yeah. It's a supply chain thing. Next picture. Again, 2 cultures, Mesoamerican culture. She's reading her fortune, it's not looking good, you know. Mm-hmm. And who's got the good fortune? Of course, the colonizing culture is smiling out at us, kind of smugly. But the truth is, those Mesoamerican cultures, there were 3 major ones, and they all crashed after 1,000 years. It just happens. So it was going to happen anyway. Anyway, next picture. There again, you see this Hollywood goddess in the place where goddesses go to shop, right? This is the goddess mall. You see all the gowns for the different goddesses and halos and things. And you've got this Mesoamerican girl looking at the raiments of the Virgin of Guadalupe, which the Virgin of Guadalupe was just another way to sell Christianity to these people by clothing her as a Madonna, you know. And the golden design is actually their deity, which was maize, the corn. It's a stylized corn design that she has on her gown. But either way, we all beseech to the same ears. They're listening to us. We know that. But yeah, it was just another one of those ways that they can use imagery to convince people. Next picture. That's called The Eye in the Sky. It's about the casinos, and you know, I don't think I have to explain this. I'm very skeptical of that. I don't understand why that was what they gave Indian people as a But the first thing my dad says, oh, well, he's the mob and the feds will be in there right away getting their share. Don't worry about it. He knew when that all came about. And it's been great and it's been evil, that light and dark spiral of human life. Something that was good, it's turned out to be not so good. Who knows? And next picture. I would have thought like a bunch of Walmarts or a bunch of Targets, like give us a chain store for us. That would have been. Frida Kahlo, this is an actual true story. If you read her biography, that those old crematoriums were very primitive and very hot, and she must have not weighed very much by the time she passed. And the heat caused her body to sit up and her hair to burst into flames. And I can only imagine being in that room. But I just remember thinking about it, how her whole life really was on fire when you think about it from the beginning. So, next picture, please. That's called, I like red shoes. And so when I had a pair of red shoes like that when I was a kid. And that's me on my sad little war pony. And it's a classic, Indians on the horizon that you see in those old movies when they look up and there's dun dun dun, and there's all these Indians lined up, right? So, but in a way I feel that my culture has been very sustaining. The stories, the way people in my family have lived, and the way that they've survived so much, and that right now we're experiencing a resurgence in Indigenous culture, which is amazing. It's blossoming everywhere. Film, fashion, science, forestry, everything. It's a great time for the cultures to come out and show you what they still have and what they can be. Next. That's just a portrait of me and my husband. He is a Gemini, but he lives up to it. He's got two distinct sides. And what I'm trying to do is shoot him in the heart with my little rubber plunger fun. But I'm not sure which angel to aim at. That's the story of my marriage. I love him very much. He's a great guy. Next. I think we're almost done here. I think we could... Is it time to stop? You want to?
No, we have.
Okay. Okay. Oh,
7
okay.
more
So
minutes.
this is the cover of the book.
Yes.
And the cover that they used, and it's the story of this little frog-toed woman, Welgatim. This little frog. Coyote has created a problem. That's another painting too, and it should have been in front of this one. But he's created a problem where he knocked over the fountain of eternal life. And he did it because he couldn't find a female that would have him. He figured if he created death on the planet, because everybody lived forever back then, that there would be widows. He could make time. Because he's always thinking that way. And so he does that. But the only widow that will have him is this homely little frog woman. She's not beautiful, but she's sweet and she's good, and well, okay, if this is all I'm going to get, fine. But sooner or later he becomes resentful of her because she's not what he'd really like to have. He'd really like to have Sumim the deer, who he tries to court, but she sees through him, and he defecates in his own hand and makes magic and makes it look like beautiful abalone and beautiful jewelry, shells and nuts and beads. And the deer, I can see through that. She's smart. But so then she says something. But the thing is, you're married. Now that's all he really hears. And in his mind, and this is the kind of guys that do this, he turns that around to be his wife's fault. That's why I can't have this, because I'm married. So this resentment builds, and at one point when she's out cooking his breakfast in the morning, singing her little morning song, he decides to annihilate her, and he takes an obsidian blade and he hacks her into a bunch of pieces and throws her in the river. Well, he goes to bed that evening, wakes up in the morning, and he hears her singing. He goes out, and there she is, cooking Good morning, husband. How did you sleep well? And he gets, at first he's startled and then he's angry. How, I dealt with you and now here you are, I'm going to do this again. So this story goes on. Now remember, these stories were told in the evening and they went on long. I'm just abbreviating terribly here, but he does this for several days. He keeps hacking her up and throwing her into the river. And finally, when she's had enough, he's coming at her one morning and she says, hold it right there, I'm just kind of really done with this. This reconstituting thing is hard on me, right? And that symbolizes women's monthly reconstitution of the possibility of life, all of that symbolism. But he hacks her up anyway, because she's warning him, I will do something. And he does it anyway, and the next morning he wakes up and she's not there. And he steps out and he's, well, good. And all of a sudden, wait, what's that? And all of a sudden there's rain. And more rain. And it rains, and it rains, and it rains like the flood of Noah. It rains, and it rains, and it rains, until there's no fire left anywhere else on the earth. And the animals are freezing, and they're wet, and they're cold. And she has created the Mount Tehama, which is now Mount Lassen, but it was a much bigger volcano. She creates that, she cracks the earth, she causes floods. I mean, she has made more than just the rain, she destroys everything she can. And I wonder if the next painting, one more, can we see the next painting? Here we are, so this is the rest of the story. So it's decided, we need to find some fire. So they send Makati the spider and Pichuli the little lizard, because they have extremely good eyesight, especially for long distance. And they get up to the top of the tallest tree they can find, and they search for days until finally they shout down, I think we see fire, but it's so far away. Really far away. And so it's decided that somebody has to go get it. So they assemble some animals, and the grizzly bear steps up first. Of course, the most powerful, the strongest. He says, I'll go. And I have the stamina and the strength. So he takes off, and the animals wait. Pichuli and Makati are watching and sending reports down. Yes, well, he's on a third of the way there. Looks like he's halfway there now, and this is over days, but he's slowing down. He looks like he can hardly move. He's turning around. He's coming back. And the bear comes back, and he's sad and dejected that he just didn't have what it takes to get that far. So next comes the deer. Well, I'm swift and strong, the stag says, I can do this, and takes off at a great clip. And the spider and the lizard, they're watching. And he also, like the bear, gets just so far because he ran himself out of fuel, basically. And he has to turn around and crawl home, basically. And then Pakuni steps forward. And she, the mountain lion, she's a huntress. And I'm neither the biggest nor the fastest or the strongest, but I can stick with it. Who's she? The resilient one, right? So she gets in there and she takes off, and the spider and the lizard keep watch, and they send down reports. She's a quarter of the way, she's halfway there. She's disappeared. We can't see her anymore. And they wait, the animals wait. And then a few days later, the spider says, I see her. She's coming back. She's moving very slowly. She looks very tired. And they wait. And finally, Pakuni enters the clearing. And animals surround her. They're bated breath. They want to see what she has. And of course, she's got to play with them a little bit, right? So she holds out one paw, nothing. She holds out another paw, nothing. And then she says, as the animal's looking pretty crestfallen now, she goes, look at my ear. Is this the one with the fire in her ear? No. See, this is the wrong slide because this is taken from an old slide, and I hadn't put the fire in her ear yet. It occurred to me after I did this painting, and it was sort of sitting around for a while that I thought, wait a minute, I should just put that fire in her ear. So you don't see it there, but if you see it, I think it is in the catalog. But of course, when she shows them, the fire is in her ear, carried in a small hairless pocket in her ear that every house cat has today.
Yes.
And that's because that's Pikuni's gift to all your house cats. To remember her strength, her resilience, her indomitable will, that she wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the biggest, but she was the one that brought the fire home. And this makes her the Promethean figure in this ancient California story. Thank you. What a pleasure to talk. Any questions? Anything? Oh, yes?
At what time did you start expressing your artistry? Your artistry?
First box of crayons.
Okay.
Yeah, and it takes you over, and you kind of, yeah. But I didn't actually get an education until I was in my late 30s. I graduated at 40, and that's when my career started. So it's never too late.
Debbie, did you have a question?
Nope. Well, I guess I said it all. And thank you. You're a wonderful audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, in a month, and I've forgotten the date now, but in a month, Karina Black will be presenting Sunday Forum on the plight of global refugees. And so I hope to see you all there. And Ms. Lowry, thank you very, very much.
Thanks to your great AV crew. Thanks for helping out with that. They were great. It worked out great.
Hearing your talk makes me think about